Hey guys, welcome to our very first spooky Halloween special. Get ready to be captivated by bone-chilling ghost stories that I've put together from around the Appalachian area. We're going to explore haunted tales where supernatural meets the mysticism of the mountains. So brace yourself and don't forget to leave the lights on. So our first story comes from Wetzel County in West Virginia. It was initially told in the Telltale Lilac Bush and Other West Virginia Ghost Tales by Ruth Ann Musick, which was first published in 1965. It's called The Christmas Tree. Mr. and Mrs. Dennis Hostutler were trying to get a tree for Christmas. I'm just going to call them Dennis and Elzina. So Dennis had tried to buy one, but none of the trees he looked at suited his wife. So on the way home, Elzina looked over in the cemetery and saw one of the prettiest trees she'd ever seen. She told Dennis to stop the car and go get it. It was dark and no one would see them, she said. Her husband wouldn't cut the tree at first, but she kept insisting. So he finally went and cut it down. As the tree fell, it seemed as if a voice said, "I'll make you sorry." Dennis put the tree on the car and started up the hill. As he got to the worst turn in the road, he met a buggy, and a man was standing beside it. When he finally got around the man in the buggy, he looked back, and there was nothing there. They continued over the ridge. When they almost got home, they saw the same man in the same buggy again. When the couple finally got home, without further delay, and put the tree up, Elzina trimmed it and called the family in to see it. She stepped back to admire it, and there was a man in a buggy. She showed it to Dennis and said it was the same man they'd seen twice on their way home. So Elzina talked to the man and asked why he insisted on following them. The man told her that he'd been killed in a buggy wreck and that as long as the pine tree was on his grave, he had a chance to get to heaven because he used to raise pine trees and give them away. But since she'd made her husband steal the tree, cut it down, and take it from the cemetery, he'd make sure she suffered the rest of her life. He said, "I'll leave you now, but you don't have long to live either. By the time the pine tree is dead, you'll be in your grave." And a month to the day after that, Elzina died. So there's a blog post in West Virginia University Library by a woman named Lori Hostutler. So she posted about this story, and she said that she learned about this in elementary school and learned that this was actually her great-grandmother. So she writes this: "After reading, I learned from my parents that Dennis was my great-grandfather who had lived in Wetzel County, and his wife Elzina. I was excited that this story was from my family, but this was a very strange story. Right away, my great-grandmother, although unnamed in the story, is cast as a bossy wife who has no problem resorting to thievery. Yikes. In the story, a spirit appears after the theft of a tree from a cemetery and predicts the suffering death of Dennis's wife because she ordered him to cut down the tree from the apparition's grave." So Lori asked her dad about it, and her dad's response to the questions were a matter of being annoyed, rolling his eyes and saying, "Yeah, they used to tell that story." And that was enough for her to know that her dad didn't think it was true. So she left it at that. And then she went on to say, "Even if my grandmother doesn't come off very well, it's still sort of a claim to fame for my family to be in the book." So if you look up Elzina's death certificate, they actually have her as Elgina. It shows that she died on August 29th, 1939 as a result of cerebral hemorrhage. That's 8 months after Christmas. Now surely a pine tree cut down for Christmas would not have lasted that long. So that information essentially negates the idea that she died before the tree did. Or does it? And usually where there's smoke, there's fire. So this story started somewhere. So is there any truth to this story? So I looked these two up on Find a Grave, and here's Dennis. born 1873, died 1955 at age 82. And his wife Elzina, who died 1939. It shows that they have 4 children. Now it shows that they are buried at the Hostetler Cemetery in Smithfield. So this is a picture of it. And it says the cemetery is located on Lowman Ridge near the old town of Fairview on the old farm. And it shows 14 people buried there. Now this is about 4 hours from me, and it would be quite a gamble to drive all the way down there just to have it somewhere that you couldn't get up to, which is pretty likely. Could be on private property, etc. But I still thought this was a really cool story that I wanted to share. So what do you think happened? Do you think there's any truth to this story? Or is there anything about the story that you could add? Let us know in comments. So our next story comes from Corbin, Kentucky. It's called The Ghost Bride of the Cumberland Falls. Now some of this information I'm getting from Raven Willow, who you can find on local.media website. Raven Willow right here. But the story itself, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Known as the Niagara of the South, Cumberland Falls is located in Corbin, Kentucky. The falls are 125 feet wide and have an average drop distance of 68 feet. It's also the only place in the Western Hemisphere where the majestic moonbow can be seen at night. People come from all around to see this moonbow. The falls have been featured in some amazing movies, including The Kentuckian with Burt Lancaster, Raintree County with Elizabeth Taylor, and Fire Down Below with Steven Seagal. Cumberland Falls is also home to some eerie and mysterious stories and ghost stories. It's no wonder why this is such a popular tourist attraction and why people from all over the world come to visit. So during Raven's visit, she wanted to ask questions and learn about the DuPont Lodge and the ghost bride and groom that had been seen by so many. While she was there, some park employees and visitors told her some of their supernatural stories. Besides reports of seeing old Civil War soldiers, phantom creatures, and a fascinating story about a catfish that lives beneath the falls, so large that it can gobble up a grown man whole. The Ghost Bride story dates back to the 1950s when a young bride and groom came to the Cumberland Falls State Park for their honeymoon and was staying at the DuPont Lodge. The young bride was fascinated with the large waterfall and insisted that her photo be taken with this beautiful waterfall in the background. So the couple found an overlook just a few hundred feet from the falls that would provide for the most beautiful picture. So as the bride stood on the cliffs at the edge of a 75 to 80 foot drop, she lost her balance and fell to her death. The groom was so distraught and heartbroken that he almost immediately jumped off the cliff to join her. So visitors have made claims of seeing the apparition of the young bride standing near the falls at various locations throughout the park, pretty much since the 50s. An employee at the park, who asked to remain unknown, told Raven that he had seen and heard the bride many times while he was working, especially in the night hours. He explained that at different times he'd heard the bride scream as she fell from the cliffs. He had heard her cry and has even heard a heavy, nauseating thud hit the ground. He explained how the sound was exactly like you'd expect to hear when a body hit. "It's a sound I never want to hear again," he said. "It made me feel sick at my stomach. It was just terrible. Gross," he added. Raven spoke with another employee at the park. They made an intriguing claim about the ghost bride. They said that during late autumn she was cleaning up around the area. She claimed that she had also heard that sickening thud sound, and she immediately looked upward and saw white flower petals falling from the sky. She said that at least 20 petals fell to the ground around her. It was late in the season, the trees were bare, and there was no flowers in bloom. So there are also stories about the bride being seen along the road near the park. Locals especially have reported seeing her roaming around the roadside late at night. One man even stopped when he saw her. He was so sure that there was a distressed lady in need of help. When he stepped out of his car, she was gone. He described what happened. He said it was a young lady wearing a long, tattered white dress. She was standing near the edge of the road looking off into the trees. It was very late and cold that night, so he stopped his car to see if he could help her. But when he opened the door and stepped out of his car, the lady vanished. He claimed that he even heard her crying and sobbing as he first passed by her. He was so positive and unsettled about what had just happened that he called the police and made a report. After checking the area, the police could never find any proof to support his claim. But he swears it happened. There's also another report of seeing the bride that came from a woman that was visiting one night to view the ever so popular moonbow. The moonbow was beautiful on that particular night. The lady and her daughter were in awe of it, capturing pictures and video of the experience. Directly in front of them, they both noticed a lady across the way, dangerously close to the water. She was motionless and pale and seemed to be peering directly into the dark water. Just as they both voiced their concern for her, she disappeared. What they considered to be proof was later discovered when they noticed a hazy apparition of a woman had been captured in their photos. Workers at the DuPont Lodge have also said that the bride visits them often. They claim that she has been known to sometimes mess up rooms and cottages after they have been cleaned. She's also made herself known to the guests many times over the years. They also say that a mysterious, watery footprint will appear in the rooms when nobody's around, as well as a distant male voice believed to be the groom that can be heard in and around the lodge. So Raven visited the Cumberland Falls August 31st, 2020, and she was able to speak with several workers and guests at the park. Every person she spoke to was positive that the ghost bride was real and still resides in the area. They said the best chances of seeing her are during the evening hours or at night near places that overlook the falls. The ghost bride has not been known to interact with people. She seems to go away when she's been spotted. Every person who has witnessed her presence claims to have been overcome with the feeling of dread or sadness when they come close to her. And of course, that horrible sound that many believe is her ghost, reliving that fatal fall from the cliffs over and over. So this would be what most would call a residual haunting, not an intelligent haunting, which is just pretty much an emotion or something that happened that's sort of just caught in time somehow and just replays over and over without any kind of intelligence of like interacting with you. You can find her on vocal.media/authors/Raven Willow. Our next story takes place at Babcock State Park in Fayette County, West Virginia. One of West Virginia's most iconic locations, Babcock State Park, has 4,127 acres of beautiful mountainside, rivers, and fully functional replica of the original Cooper's Mill that once stood on the ground. Park visitors can enjoy a wide range of recreational activities like hiking, fishing, mountain biking, as well as whitewater rafting nearby a new river. What many people don't know, though, is that the park has a very dark past, especially Cabin 13. But is this story true? There's been many ghost hunting videos, books, rumblings about Cabin 13 at Babcock State Park. In the early morning hours of April 30th, 1996, a Fayette County 911 operator received a phone call from a distraught Mike Flippo. a well-known and well-liked pastor at the landmark Church of God in Nitro, West Virginia, which is a community of about 8,000 located 11 miles west of Charleston, West Virginia. Flippo claimed that he and his wife Cheryl had been attacked in the middle of the night by burly masked intruders. Flippo stated he'd been knocked unconscious and was cut by the attacker, and that his wife was breathing but laying in the floor in a pool of her own blood. When the paramedics arrived at the scene, Cheryl was pronounced dead. As police began to investigate, the details of the case emerged, and it quickly became apparent that Mr. Flippo wasn't telling the truth. It was a cabin with no sign of forced entry, injuries on Mr. Flippo that didn't match the brutality he claimed happened, key objects out of place, and testimonies of an unhappy marriage were all clues the police used to charge him with his wife's murder. I looked this up and I found that this is a true story. The state of West Virginia against James Michael Flippo. On March 1st, 1996, Mr. Flippo and his wife Cheryl purchased a life insurance policy on her life. The policy became effective April 1st, 1996, and the policy, of course, named her husband as the beneficiary on April 27th, 1996. Mr. Flippo accompanied Mr. Bogus to Babcock State Park for the purpose of having Mr. Flippo, who was a minister, baptize Mr. Bogus in a park stream. They went to the park in Mr. Bogus' red Camaro. After the baptism, Mr. Flippo took pictures of him as he removed his wet clothing, and at some point during the same day, Mr. Flippo telephoned the park and made reservations to rent a cabin for him and his wife on April 29th, 1996, 2 days after the baptism. This is also 2 days after he became the beneficiary for the money. During the early evening hours of April 29th, Mr. Flippo and his wife traveled to Babcock State Park. They did not secure a key to the cabin as their arrival was late. However, the cabin was unlocked. About 2:11 in the morning, April 30th, the Fayette County 911 operator received a phone call from Mr. Flippo. During the call, he stated that he and his wife had been attacked in their cabin. And like we covered earlier, once the police got there and started investigating, the story didn't add up. And even though it had been raining outside and the ground was soft, they found no footprints other than their own around the cabin. All they found was the dead body of Cheryl lying between a bed and a wall. The deputy observed that Cheryl's skull was open and her brain matter was exposed. So long story short, money yet again turns someone evil, even if they are a pastor. James Flippo killed his wife, Cheryl, for money. And to this day, Cabin 13 is said to be extremely haunted. So do you dare to go to Cabin 13 and spend the night? Maybe see for yourself if it's haunted? Let me know in the comments. I plan to do more stories on my other channel, Haunted Hillbillies. I'll put the link in the description. If you would like to hear more stories like this, follow me over there. But from me and Leo to you, I hope you guys have a great Halloween, and I hope you enjoyed the video.